it is a blessing to be able to trade. It is a blessing to have another day. Right away, I wanted to get into, our mindset. You share it is a, you know, environment where share lessons learned collectively, things that we've experienced or we've done, um, going through the process. And one of those processes today, I want to talk about uh, the capital mindset. And let me share my screen. Go ahead. Actually, want to do a continuation, but the capital mindset. Hold on, real quick. Share this. Go in. Screen number 3. Make sure you guys can see my screen. Um, right in front of me, I'm sharing a PDF. It's called the Mastermind Mindset, the Capital Mindset, and it is about the drawdown, leveraging, and architecture of clear decisions. One of the reasons that I experienced last week is our last month was the drawdown. And sometimes your drawdown is not just financial, it is mental, it is physical, and that impacts your judgment. And so, when you over leverage in life, and you take on too much, right? Uh, every decision becomes force, foggy, or cloudy, and it's not just strategy. And you start reacting to the pressures that you have, and that is sometimes like a silent tax. So the things going on around you, mentally, physically, um, financially, time wise, that all becomes things that is charged against your judgment, right? And sometimes you pay a tax when things are overwhelming. And so, there's a risk to sit with every trade. And that's the architecture of, what you've committed to, what's happening, how much you're doing. And, you know, the financial drawdown is just one, right? And that is, multiple things that's happening. And so, when it comes to the capital mindset, your um, capital preservation is key, and that is the mental and financial runway that you have in your life. And that is that capital preservation that have this space to be able to make decisions, the space to um, impact. It comes to having clarity. Um, from clarity to make the decision. And there's good leverage and there's overextension, right? Sometimes in trading we can use leverage, we use options, we have futures. That is good leverage, and but then you also have a bad leverage, right? Too much debt that has you making decisions in the market where you're thinking about, man, I need to get XYZ back out of the market, and that will, you know, allow you to be overexposed. Um, when you can decide from strength, right, not from survival, you're able to make better decisions, right? Where when you have funds and you have excess capital, you'll realize a lot of times you'll trade better when there's a big cushion. You'll trade better when you have no trades underweight, right? And so that decision to uh, trade from strength, right, is a lot better, and creates a space to think clearly, right? And so when we talk about space, I was actually going through the surplus doctrine, right? Meaning that your quality decisions, right, normally operate from surplus. You a lot of times when you don't need money or you don't need to make a decision, you a lot of times make a better decision. And so we talk about the capital surplus, um, emotional surplus, um, surplus options. When you are have a lot of choices, right? You're going to realize that you make better choices when there's a lot of choices available, right? When you're not just stuck and pressured. And I had made a post yesterday about um, you know being um, living below your means, right? Saying that living below your means is almost like a superpower, right? When you don't over leverage, overspend, and you don't have a lot of debt, a lot of times you make decisions better, right? In life, right? You're not at the mercy, and that is a superpower. Just being over, being having a surplus in life is sometimes a superpower because you're not compromised. Sometimes being, over leveraged and having too much debt, right? You start making decisions based on the debt that you have, right? And sometimes in the market, when you have a lot of capital available, right? You're not forcing trades, trying to make something happen. You're taking what's available. So, like having money in the markets is power because it compounds quietly. It gives you the ability to wait, right? If you're not trading from under the eight ball, I like to say, right? Being underwater and trading and in life sometimes works against you, right? When you're overstacked and that is considered bad leverage, right? When you have good leverage, you're able to wait. It's just like when the market crashed in 2008, 2009, people that had capital, available, right? They were able to take advantage of opportunities, right? And the same thing when the market runs damn near 200 points yesterday, not being over leveraged, right? Having capital to deploy at that time, is a superpower because it gives you advantage to take a take advantage of the opportunities, and that is being able to deploy surplus capital, right? And in life, you also have good leverage where if you spend the money to obtain skills, get better health, take advantage of opportunities and able to take advantage of productive assets. Buying extra houses instead of buying extra cars, right? Sometimes that is good leverage, right? And it's designed to expand your options, right? The runway never shortens it. And bad leverage, right? Sometimes hope, the lifestyle, um, you know, create separate temporary setbacks and seeps into permanent decision damage, right? And it's the same thing with oversized positions, right? They create psychological drawdowns, right? When I was in the military, I used to say people they would give these young military men, the Marines, um, Air Force, they would give them credit, and they would get them. The Air Marines just basically say, "Hey, you can go in there, buy things on credit. You have a credit." And then when they 4 years came up, they were in so much debt that they would decide to stay in, or they would re-enlist so they can get rid of all the debt that they were in. And says, "Oh man, I'm just gonna do another 4 years. They're gonna give me a big bonus." And it was creating debt that basically had to make decisions and and could possibly permanent decisions based on them over leverage. And so I seen that firsthand in life with young guys that were physically strong and mentally weak. Right? They give them over leverage. And so sometimes that was bad leverage because it gave them a lifestyle that made them make permanent decisions to get out of debt. And also in trading, sometimes you'll see a continued average down, right? While you are, um, you know, creating more leverage that, takes away future decisions. because of the leverage is being built on. And so now you have to stay in that trade, which creates, prevents you from um, taking advantage of market opportunities. So, when it comes to trading, the standard is never let any single position in market or life put you into a negative space long enough to compromise the next decision. So, if you think about what I just said about the military men that, or men and women that was given debt and given credit and say, don't worry, you got a paycheck, it's coming no matter what every 2 weeks. They got into a lot of debt and it put them in a negative space where when they came up to get out of the military, they had to make a compromise the next decision. They didn't want to get out because they didn't know if they're gonna get a job, how it's gonna pay all this debt. They got a car, they got these credit cards, right? And it, allowed them to make another decision, right? That was gonna cost them another 4 years. And so, there's pillars. This is kind of like a philosophy, but zero life drawdown, right? And that, um, is when your financial drawdown, dips below its peak, right? And life drawdown occurs when high stress, toxic debt, overcommitment forces you into survival mode. You're just trying to survive into the next week, the next month, right? And so you want to avoid having a deep drawdown so you can that preserves your mental capital, right? Because you can't refund the amount of mental capital that it takes. So you want to have a zero life drawdown where you're not drawing down to the point where you're in survival mode. Decision distance, right? You want to maintain a buffer between your current state and financial and emotional collapse, right? The moment you backed into a corner, you risk tolerant breaks and bad decisions compound. So, you want to prevent being in make decisions that back you into a corner, right? And this way, it's not just dollars alone, right? Sometimes, um, you'll make a decision where it's like, man, it's going to affect the next 4 years of my life. I talk about my daughter that, decided to leave Howard, and it's like, well, you wanted to give yourself some space. You don't want to just, you wanted to calculate space and give you enough time. Like, don't wait to the last minute to figure out what you're gonna do, right? Give it some distance so you'll have options, right? And pillar three is calculated versus toxic leverage, right? You can leverage a house, you can, you can borrow, but you want to have calculated versus toxic leverage, meaning that debt is a multiplier, right? Using leverage to buy assets, help acquire skills, whether it's, learning how to trade, buying a house, right? You get a return on investment, like when you develop skills, right? You build an equity as a force multiplication. You buy a house and have a payment, that is a calculated leverage where you have appreciation. But if you're taking out, credit to, take vacations and, buy motorcycles or something, right, which is just a fun lifestyle, right? Or, you get into trades where, you're down 50%, 75%, and now you have to hold onto a losing trade, right? That's kind of like self-sabotage, right? It's the same thing that you hold on to a house, but you build an appreciation. You hold on to an option contract down 75%, right? You may have an opposite outcome. You lose in time, right? And so the intent behind it, right? The trading drawdown versus a life drawdown. Um, over leverage the living and going paycheck to paycheck with high debt, right? That's a life drawdown. A trading drawdown. You know, um, it's similar of borrowing more than what you have, and now you have a margin call, right? Or having to be able to panic sell at the worst possible price. So you want to avoid um, you know, those trading drawdowns versus life drawdowns, um, the position sizing, right? If you can, if you take a position that you can sleep comfortably, right? The difference between having one contract and 10 contracts, right? Oversizing in trading, right? It converts a normal loss into a substantial risk. So you don't want to have, you know, this is one of the reasons I say if you have 10 contracts or 20 contracts, you can cut it down to one, in the same day before you hold overnight. You don't have that, worry overnight, right? And then that's the same thing as putting all the energy and capital into one risky move with no cash reserve behind it. So, there's a difference between the trading drawdown and life drawdowns. So, I had this document that I was going through, but one of the things I wanted to touch on and I put inside, um, you know, uh, a space. It was, another part of your capital mindset is creating spaces to make good decisions, right? And sometimes it's not about chasing the trade. It's not about chasing the money in life. Um, you know, it is, you know, being able to have and put yourself in position so you can make good decisions, right? And so protecting your decision environment, not just simply your strategy, because a good strategy executed in a compromised space produces a bad account. So, if you have a environment where it allows you to make a good decision, right? And that environment that you have, um, if you can fix the environment, it will fix the entries, right? And that is another, mindset is that if I can create clean decision spaces, right, where I'm not making decisions out of desperation, um, and this is, reviewing your current space, right? So the decision space is the distance between your current condition and a point at which your choices stop being choices, right? It's almost like if you had 3 kids, 4 kids, right? And, you know, you had one after the other, right? Now you are making decisions based on, you know, the amount of kids that you had and the ability to take care of them, right? And so now you just created a space that, put you in a point where maybe it's not the right decision, but you're doing it out of, obligation, not out of, what's best for, the family, et cetera. Is, well, I have capacity. I have to move this location because it's the only place I can afford to take care of these kids. And, that's running out of capacity to make decisions. So when your decision space is wide, you have, the freedom to make a decision. You can wait, pass, cut, reduce, press, right? You have these different options. And these are a wide decision base makes it genuinely available to you, right? When you have a narrow space, the menu shrinks without announcing itself, right? It's believed that you're making a choice, but it's just the impact. You say you have 4 kids in California, and you don't have a job, right? You think you're making a choice to move to a different location, but basically you're being forced to, right? And so you're selecting from a list that pressure is already edited, and this is where failure, that some people never diagnose is that they're making decisions based off of a narrow space, right? And you can, um, and this is optimizing the decision, um, and creating an environment where you have a place to operate in better decision making. So it's just like cleaning up your paying off debt, right? And you have zero debt, and you have more opportunities. The trading is not hurting you. You basically have a better decision space to produce better outcomes, right? Being able to wait before you take a trade, right? Meaning that you have patience, right? And it costs you nothing. Whether you take a trade today or tomorrow, it doesn't cost you anything because you created a space where you can wait, right? And that is, um, a mindset, right? Being able to be aggressive and go in when you have a good opportunity is creating a wide decision space, right? Ability to take a trade and be wrong without escalating, right? Willingness to sit in cash and say, hey, I don't have to make a trade, whether I take a trade this week or not, right? I can sit in cash and even miss out on the opportunity. I had that space. Well, a narrow decision space is like, man, I got to make, you know, um, $3,000 before the end of the month, or I'm gonna lose my house, or I'm gonna not be able to pay a bill. Right now, you narrow down your decision space, where now you have urgency, and you may get tunnel vision on a single outcome. You think like, damn, I gotta make sure I make 3 grand before the end of the week, or I'm gonna be screwed up, right? And that's eliminating decision space. So you have these capitals that you have, and this is where a clean space, it allows you to make a financial, um, allow clean space allows you to make good financial decisions, right? You can make cash investments, income, you can apply credit collectively. When you have limited capital in the financial, you start oversizing, you might have lifestyle inflation, right? Cognitive is mental space, right? Where you can focus and have judgment, pattern recognition. When you don't have good mental space, you may be sleep deprived. You have more stress, information overload, right? When you have a good physical capital, right, you are able to get healthy and build strength, recovery, and stamina, right? When you neglect your physical, you may have chronic fatigue, poor recovery. So these 7 capitals that you have, which is financial, cognitive, physical, emotional, time space, right? When you control your calendar and you can implement more time, right? Sometime last month I had limited uh, time capital, right? I had overcommitment and a lot of obligations, right? And I was trying to be in multiple places, so that created a um, I was over leveraged with time. And then, options, right? You want the flexibility, ability to wait or pivot and go into cash. So you want to have a lot of option capital, right? And when you start having fixed costs and you buy, 5 cars and have 4 kids, right? You run, sometimes you run out of options. So it's just the mindset of being able to recognize decision capital. So one of the things that I wanted to do on this mindset is, build on the um, thing I shared, the site, right? So I actually added this mindset, uh, right, to this the capital mindset, right? We had see if I can turn it up right here and just go here to the home page. I'm having a so when you go into this link, right? I had a decision. Do you have a space to make a clean decision, right? And this is kind of just talked about right. I had this link here on the main page, capital mindset. So this is what we did on Monday and Tuesday, the P&L leak, mindset protocol. I'm gonna add on to this here where it's capital mindset. Where it's this, do you have the space to make clean decisions? And this talks about the capital mindset of the 7 capitals that I kind of just went over. And then you had these decision space. If it's green, amber, or red, right? That means that you're free to make a good decision when you're in the green. You compress, right? You got stress rising, urgency creeping in, but you're still functional. So you trade with half the size. When you're in a drawdown, right? You got bills depend on the outcome, flooded, right? With decisions that you have to make, right? That's where you want to stand down and restore the capital before you start putting it in, because you don't want to trade with bad leverage. You don't want to have the ego, and so you want to have the freedom through discipline, right? And this is where the capital mindset protects the operator before the capital is deployed, right? So the first rule is to be able to have freedom to preserve your capital, right? Protect your mental and financial runway, so you'll have the options. And this is a decision space index, and what's true for right now. Any single capital at 4 below forces amber, right? And 2 forces red. So if you only can score if you're in a red state, right, where you have, these drawdowns in the emotional and the relation or the time, right, it gives you a space to hold. You want to be at 56 and 70 so you can be free to deploy and trade, right? And it's kind of just like a test. So, you don't want to have if you feel oversizing, you have toxic, you have lifestyle inflation, right? If you down here, it's like, man, I'm down to, making a trade. If I make a trade and it doesn't go up by tomorrow, you know, that's down at a one. If you have time and space and you have capital, right? Where, hey, I'm trading and I'm not over leveraged. I got one contract tomorrow. It's not gonna hurt me. I can sleep on it. Even if it goes to zero, I'll still be okay. I can be at a 10, right? That means that today going into trading, I could trade with a full size, or I'm in a free state, right? Like, regardless, I'm under leverage. But if you're trading with, say, 10 contracts, or 80% of your 90% of your contract, or your capital, right? You're oversizing, right? And then if you're in a physical, right, you chronically fatigued, tired, etc. Um, you know, you come down here and it will allow you to see that, all right, yeah, I'm over extended physically. I'm tired, I'm sleepy, I'm hurting, I'm on pain medication, right? You can go down and say that physically, I'm not ready today, right? Or time, like, all right, I got multiple appointments, I got a dentist appointment, doctor's appointment, I got 2 phone calls I need to have. You're like, man, I don't have any time today, right? And it will tell you to stand down and restore, right? Just, have the freedom to make the right decisions. So, I created this, in the mastermind where, you had this decision index and then you have a capital gate, right? If I can take the full plan loss without changing my next decision, right? Uh, that means that I'm going to take a position today and it doesn't change anything, right? So if I take one contract, it's different than taking 10. If I took a full plan loss out of 20 contracts, I'm trading with too much, right? I have no bill, ego need, emotional urgency to depend on his outcome, right? So the money that I'm making today, or risking, I'm not losing anything, right? I have no bill, no ego need, no emotional urgency depends on his outcome. I'm not looking at this to pay for anything. All right, the downside is defied and capped and survival before entry. This is the capital gate, right? Seeing if you free to actually trade, right? Decision spans or preserves future options, right? Whether I take a trade today, lose or not, I still have my options available later, right? I will still choose if nobody can see the results. So I will take this trade, whether I lost. This is like calling out a trade in public. When I take a trade in public, right, I will still choose it if nobody can see the result. Whether if I was embarrassed that, man, if I take this trade and I lost, I would be embarrassed, and I shouldn't take that trade. But if I can check this, right, my gate is clear to trade, and I have capital, right? So you run this before a position, debt decision, major purchase, or life commitment, right? And this is your capital gate, right? This is a pre-decision circuit breaker. If you start thinking that, if I went out and bought 2 houses right now without my wife knowing, right? You know, um, and and now I'm paying more in debt or something, right? So, that would probably put me at I'll probably be stressed out, right? And it doesn't allow me to have future options. Something like that. So you don't use capital to escape pressure. I preserve capital so pressure cannot control me, right? And that is the kind of the mindset of being free, right? I preserve the capital so pressure cannot control me, right? I'm not going to get in debt, so I got to re-enlist for 4 years in the military, and that is a capital gate, right? And so, that was one of the things when I was in the military. It's like, man, I'm not getting in debt. I'm not re-enlisted, right? My 4 years was up. I was getting out. I seen other people get stuck. So surplus creates patience, and patience protects standards. Standards preserve capital, and preserve capital keeps the next decision clean, right? And that is kind of the mindset. So this is the document that I'm gonna share, or the website where you can actually go through and run through these different spaces, right? And have that as a capital gate decision space, and this just shows the operating manual, right? Take inventory, create distance, deploy, and restore, right? Can you rebuild before your recovery even happens? And that is the um, mindset for the day, right? Being able to survive and have a free capital mindset where you can restore your capital before deploying capital. You're not going to lose in a trade, right? In life, you know, have these financial zero drawdown, all right, zero life drawdowns. All right, cool. Hopefully, you guys bookmark this mindset, because when I do the mindsets, I'm actually gonna put them in here now. So this way, you had a link to the site. You can review what we talked about. All right. On that note, I want everybody to enjoy their morning. We got all-time highs right now, and it is the same. I'm gonna look for a catalyst, and we at the top of the market. AMD had a good earnings and still dropped. So we're gonna see just a little bit of extension, right? I just had a uh, mindset, or I just had a billions document run. I'll be posting this inside the chats. All right, my process is running, and let's preserve capital today. All right, peace out, mentally, physically, and financially. All right, thanks.